What's up, everybody? Good morning. 2 hours of GoJo and Golic coming your way. We are back. GoJo is back from the hellscape that is the Atlanta airport. We have a lot to get to today. The coaching carousel in full swing. Of course, we will talk the Jets' new head coach, plus rising temps down in the 305. Jimmy Butler suspended for missing a flight, ? What next? And championship storylines. AFC, NFC championship games are set. We will talk about who has the most intriguing storyline. Taylor Swift. All that and more coming up on GoJo and Golic.
Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield here with you guys. We got a good one coming your way. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review the show. Leave us a 5-star rating. Watch us here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. Plenty of things to get to, as Jesse mentioned. Taylor Swift receiving positive publicity and mention on this show. Certainly not a thing that has happened or will in the future. NFL storylines to look at. Plenty of news in the coaching carousel coming up. The last couple of days were incredibly giving as plenty of teams punched their tickets. And one team learned a very valuable lesson that should have been obvious all along. But speaking of things that were obvious all along, apparently this last weekend was just not supposed to be one that worked out well for us, as we were off yesterday in no small part due to the fact that me and Dad were battling the travel gods coming back from Atlanta. Because, man, when you got the opportunity to watch your team lose in painstaking fashion in a championship game that means more to you than it should, as I outlined the other day, the best thing you can do is follow that up by spending the night in the Hartfield-Jackson Airport. Dad, which you didn't have to do. Mercifully, you got out, but still a hellish travel day coming off a holiday weekend in Atlanta, the championship weekend in Atlanta, and then, of course, to throw it on top, a generational snowstorm of about 3/4 of an inch that rendered that city completely powerless against its foes. So I'm having a great time. How are you this morning, Dad?
Oh, I had flashbacks of when the Super Bowl was in Atlanta, and Atlanta had the ice storm, and it was a hellscape there as well. I had to go to the Pro Bowl from Atlanta and was stuck on this is before they time you out where you can only spend X amount of time in the plane away from the gate. I was on the plane for 5.5 hours before we returned to the gate. So that was way back then. This is now not much better, quite honestly. So, I mean, we did the show, obviously, Tuesday morning in Atlanta after the Notre Dame-Ohio State game, so that didn't let us get out early from Atlanta. And the Atlanta airport going through security can be hours of fun after a big event like this. So we both had 4 o'clock flights, actually 5 o'clock flights. And we're like, well, we got to check out of the hotel. Let's go to the hotel, or let's go to the airport like 1 in the afternoon. Make sure we have plenty of time. It took a little while to get through security, and then we just watched. We both got on our planes. We were texting one another as we were both in line for de-icing, which, again, Atlanta is not prepared for the half-inch of frickin' snow that they got, and everything just shut down. We were both sitting on the plane for over 3 hours before we went back to the gate. Mike, you can explain what you had in front of you.
You got to go back to the gate with normal de-icing where it was just backed up and couldn't get out of there. You've seen it on the airport tarmac, the little tug cart that pulls the planes back into the gate when they get close by, the little yellow cart. We got out there, and for some reason, apparently one other plane was getting pulled by the tug cart, and it broke, and we were too close to that plane, so we were trapped behind in our big-ass plane, behind that little tug cart. And so, like the scene out of some bad comedy, we had to have another tug cart come and get us and pull us out from behind the broken tug cart and go back to the gate. After 4 hours on the plane, I did the thing, Dad, where you take a nap and wake up and think, oh, surely we're in the air. We have moved somewhere, and had not moved an inch. And that was when I should have realized that abandoning all hope was the only way forward.
I picked the longest movie on the TV plane that I could watch, and I watched it in its entirety, watch half of another movie while still on the ground, back to the gate. So we both end up back at our gates. We're in different terminals at this point, texting one another, saying, hey, what's your status? Well, because I'm going back to Arizona, Mike's going to LA, so we both have long flights in front of us. And so we got there at 1 in the afternoon. I left at 12:10, right after midnight. And I felt like, and it was one of those because everything kept timing out for flight attendants and captains, it kept timing out. They were like, oh, we timed out. And we were on the plane trying to go to the runway, and the captain was like, well, we need to take off by 12:10, or we have two people that are going to time out. We're going to have to go back to the gate. We're like, my God, step on it. And we took off at like 12:05. And I felt, Mike, like I left a man down. I felt like, oh, my God, don't leave any
100%.
man behind. And I felt like I left you behind, even though I didn't, and I had no control over the fact that I ended up landing back in Arizona at like 3 a.m, and you had to sleep on a airport floor, which I'm sure finding a comfortable spot was not fun.
You know what is interesting is when you see people push to the limit, because the people at our gate were pushed to the limit. They did the thing Delta did. Shame on y'all, Delta. I trusted you, and this is how you did me here. A sham of an experience all the way through here. I'm pissed at you guys right now. But we're sitting there, and they delay us all the way till 2 a.m. So, of course, by that point, no one can get hotels. They're not going to offer us hotels. And so they start handing out the little blankets for everyone to go around on the floor. And that was the point, Dad, where I watched the thin veil that keeps society from being our animal counterparts completely lifted. And you watch everyone. I love post-apocalyptic movies, right? Zombie movies about the after some apocalyptic event, and watching how society organizes itself. You saw all types in there. You saw the people that were coping with humor, giving me their 30-second stand-up bits and all their jokes about the situation, which I loved hearing at 2 o'clock in the morning. You had the people that turned into the radicalized, or the I called them the zealots, screaming about how this was all a scam by the airline company. Saw some woman lose her mind, start berating a gate agent that hadn't even been there the whole time. I saw an activist, a guy printed out actual instructions on how to go and file a complaint with the Department of Transportation, and was going around the gate handing it to everyone, because he said, I figured if we did this in bulk, we would have a better chance of getting some money back on all of this. It was one of the most unbelievable things. But I tell you what I did meet in the process here, and this is the most amazing part. I may have actually met the happiest sports fan in America in 2024, 2025. I may have met the guy who is having a better 4 months than anyone else has had in the world of sports. Because I'm sitting there at the gate and I strike up conversation. And unfortunately, the two guys next to me were really nice Ohio State fans. So I was talking to them about the game and everything else. And we got to talking about where everyone was from. This guy was from Mission Viejo, California, born and raised there. And so, being born and raised there, he grew up a Dodgers fan. Great year for him this year. Shohei Ohtani won the World Series. They're signing everyone under the sun this offseason. So that's checkbox number one. But his parents are from Buffalo, New York. And so they have raised him as a Buffalo Bills fan. Doing pretty well in that department right now, one of the final 4 NFL teams. And then to throw it on top of that, went to Ohio State Law School. So obviously a big Buckeye fan coming off this national championship. So if the Buffalo Bills complete the mission, he will be 3 championships in about the span of 4 months for the teams that he cares about, sitting at this gate with me. So he was having a great time. All the Buckeye fans were having a great time. And I was humbled before the altar, Dad, because I used to be a guy, and I don't know where you guys stand on this, Jesse especially. I used to always think, when I watched that movie, The Terminal, with Tom Hanks in it, where he plays a foreign expat who gets stuck in, I think it was JFK, because of a coup in his old country and a passport issue, so he can't leave the airport. I used to think, I could do that. I spend a lot of time in airports. I know some of the nooks and crannies here. I'm not a very high-maintenance guy. Going through this evening was a great reminder that no, I am not built for what went on there. I didn't know The Terminal, by the way, is based on a true story of a guy who lived in the airport for 18 years before he got out of there in France. But, Dad, either way, I always thought I could, and I realize now that may be a mistake because, boy, it was a lot tougher foraging and gathering than I expected in this juncture.
Yeah, I mean, you just how people deal with the situation. I mean, you just got to find as comfortable a spot as you can and try and hunker down. Now, I didn't get caught overnight. I got caught overnight in Dallas one time, but I was out of back by the ticket counters because the hotel was connected to there, and I found out I didn't have a room, or I was only supposed to be there for that last night. So I went there, a bit long story short, it was sold out and it was too late. It was like 1 a.m. I couldn't get back to the gates. So I had to sleep on the floor, on the hard tile floor by the ticket counters and not on the carpeting or by the seat. So did you pull up a piece of floor? Did you try and get on a seat, on a chair? How did you end the night?
I pulled up on the floor, and let me tell you, someone in my gate they were like, "Oh, I don't know if they let you stay in the gate when they cancel the flight. I think you might have to go back outside." And I said, "I tell you what, they are going to have to come and lift me themselves dead weight if they want to get me out of here after all this. And I promise you, when I go dead weight, I'm a pretty fat, you know what? And so that's going to be a bad time for everyone involved. And that's what they need to get right. So yeah, I laid myself on the ground. I tried to soothe, because, you know, at a certain point, everyone always like, oh, airport calories don't count, but I travel enough to where I'd like to not destroy myself with that. But once it started going sideways, I walked to the McDonald's that was right across the way. And I was like, yeah, all right, we're McDoubling these problems into oblivion. I made the mistake of going back to the McDonald's and thinking, I'll really treat myself with a McFlurry, as if the McDonald's at the airport was going to have a working ice cream machine. That one, I had to put a hand up. Like, that's on me. I should not have expected that. Many people pointed that out. They were absolutely right. It was dumb. I felt dumb. And that was probably my worst folly during all of this. But ate about 6 different meals at the various Delta Sky Lounges inside the airport there, and that McDonald's. Got a couple of good nuggets from the magazine store as well. And watched all of Rings of Power on Amazon Prime, which is a wonderful prequel to Lord of the Rings that I really enjoyed. And at some point we can have Jessica Smetana on here to explain that to Dad, who inexplicably doesn't like Lord of the Rings, even though he likes plenty of things that are tangent to Lord of the Rings. So that was the experience that we survived. Congratulations to everyone else that made it out of the Atlanta airport. I hope your travels went smoother, or at the very least you had time to rest on the back end here as we watched people descend into madness. And some of those people descending into madness, Dad, may have gotten a reprieve if their team hired the right head coach. So why don't we get to some of that? Because while that was going on and we weren't doing the show yesterday, there was a bunch of news on the NFL head coaching front, headlined mostly by the loss of the Detroit Lions' 2 coordinators in Ben Johnson, offensive coordinator who took the job with the Chicago Bears, and Aaron Glenn, Lions defensive coordinator, who now, Dad, gets the task of trying to go back here and do what has felt impossible for most of my lifetime and turn the Jets into a winner here. Aaron Glenn, as you talked about in the lead up to this, former first-round pick for the Jets out of Texas A&M at cornerback there. Told friends that coaching the Jets was his dream job. We'll see if when that dream turns to reality, that's the case. But Dad, when you saw this finally go through, what was your first thought?
Oh, I thought it was a good hire. I mean, you knew he was going to get hired by somebody. You knew both of these coaches, how Ben Johnson had turned down the jobs last year, that both were probably going to take jobs this year. They made a 2-year run. They didn't get there, and it was timing is everything. You know, you got to take a job that you think will fit you. Now, if they thought they could wait for another cycle, they would have. But for Aaron Glenn, I mean, he was there the first 7 years of his career, first-round pick of the Jets. So as he said, his dream job to coach in New York. So I thought that was a good hire. I thought Ben Johnson to Chicago was a good hire. But I'll say again, we have no idea. You know, I'm not going to grade them like everybody is going to grade them. They were the 2 hottest coordinators out there to be hired after a former coach in Mike Vrabel was hired by the Patriots. So, I mean, that doesn't surprise me. But again, they now sit in the big chair, and we have no idea what coaches do they put around them is going to be obviously a key as well. Not so much, well, still everywhere, but in Chicago, Ben Johnson is going to handle Caleb Williams. But for the Jets, Aaron Glenn's a defensive guy. So where does he go from offensive coordinator? Where do they go from a GM standpoint? As well. And what do they do with Aaron Rodgers? I think the Aaron Rodgers experiment is over, so I think they'll be looking for a new quarterback. But I think it's a good fit. I think Ben Johnson's a good fit. But again, you're kind of throwing your hands in the air saying these were the 2 biggest coordinators names out there to get jobs. They got jobs. Now we see what they can do.
Yeah, I guess from that standpoint, like, hey, Jets fans, if you want to feel good about something, I'll give this hire an A+. It's awesome. It was one of the names coming from a team that's had plenty of success, a coach that anecdotally, it sounds like, connects really well with players. We have watched over the last couple of seasons morph his defense to the personnel available to them, watch the way it's changed between different kinds of structures, more man coverage versus zone coverage this year after the Aiden Hutchinson injury. Dad, from the outside looking in, We know about as much as we can as a general public about Aaron Glenn to feel good about this hire relative to the rest of the NFL, given the exposure the Lions have had, given the press that he's gotten as of late, knowing he was probably going to be a head coach, all those things. And to your point, it's still only going to matter so much in how this goes, and we still don't know so much because of the coordinator and because of the Jets of it all. Like, have we not, over the course of this last cycle, Dad, learned anything other than who your ownership group is tends to matter so much more than we give it credit for in how everything's going to be done after this? And with the Jets, we've seen it's been an unmitigated disaster for the majority of my adult lifetime. So all of a sudden, expecting Aaron Glenn to be able to unjets the Jets seems pretty foolish, but we're going to do it again because that's the hope drug that we have to sell fans every time we go around these things in the NFL.
Yeah, and so you look at not only teams getting new coaches, but teams losing coaches. So we talked about Detroit losing both their coordinators, and the possibility that Hank Fraley, the old line coach, may go as well and be an offensive coordinator with Ben Johnson, I believe. And Terrell Williams, the defensive line coach, he is leaving to go to New England because he was on the staff with Mike Vrabel, was in Tennessee. So Williams was the D-line coach in Detroit. Now he's gone. So you want to talk about not just losing your coordinators, but you're going to lose assistant coaches as well.
Yeah, Deshae Townsend, their defensive backs coach, has been getting some coaching interviews here. There's some guys internally they might be able to promote, but Dad, this is now the next test for them. Success breeds opportunity for everybody involved here. The rising tide lifts all ships. And in Detroit, what Dan Campbell and this group had done gave all these guys the opportunity to be courted this way. They obviously earned that themselves, but now how they navigate, it's going to be really important, Dad. I think of what we've seen recently, the Philadelphia Eagles losing both of their coordinators after the Super Bowl season. Start out 10-1. Everyone knows that didn't really look like a 10-1 team, and the back half of the season goes awry. They have to change coordinators again. Conversely, last year, you have the Baltimore Ravens, who it all happened on defense. You know, Todd Monken stuck around on offense, but defensively, you lose Mike McDonald, Anthony Weaver, Denard Wilson, all these guys going and taking head coach and coordinator jobs in addition to some of the free agents you lose, and we're able to navigate it a little better. We're one of the teams that made it to the divisional round, look great on offense all year long, and so that's the next test, Dad, for Dan Campbell is can they go out here and have a plan to replace these guys that, especially with Ben Johnson, were so looked at as weapons that you were able to hold on to longer than you should have been able to given how good they were.
Yeah. And listen, it goes to the front office as well. For the Jets, they're interviewing Lance Newmark for the GM spot. Now, he was with Detroit from 98 to 23, from all the way as scout to the director of player personnel. Last year, he was with Washington. Look what he's currently with Washington as their assistant GM. And he's getting interviewed to take the Jets job. So a great job in Washington. Now just there a year, and there were others obviously that built that team as well. But you know, you're looking at just cherry picking from different teams and what you're going to have to replace from the teams that are losing not only coaches but execs as well.
Yep, the brain drain is on this off
right now. There's 3 teams that made the playoffs this year. I've got tremendous amount of respect for the coaches and the players in this league. Having competed against them for the last 6 years. Dan Campbell, Kevin O'Connell, you're talking about 2 guys that are up for Coach of the Year awards as the season ends here. And to be quite frank with you, I kind of enjoyed beating Matt LaFleur twice a year.
Ben Johnson with a little bit of edge to him here. GoJo and Golic, Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr. with you guys, as that is newly hired Chicago Bears head coach and former Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson, who talked about by so many, Dad, as more bookish, right? They weren't sure about the personality fit, how he interviewed, the decisions to keep going back to the nest in Detroit. Ultimately, he lands here now. How did you feel about that shot immediately at division rival Green Bay Packers coach Matt LaFleur before the ink was barely dry on the contract at that point, and he is already going at the head coach of one of the Bears' biggest rivals?
Well, when I first saw it, there was kind of a smirk on his face, like maybe they were friends and he was just kind of jabbing him as a friend. which I don't know. We know in coaching circles you cross paths a ton of times, whether you're working on the same staff or you just see each other. So I wasn't sure at first if it was a jab at Matt LaFleur because of the little smirk, like he was joking around. They beat him twice this year, and obviously made the joke about beating him twice every year. So I really wasn't sure if it was a mean jab at LaFleur or just kind of we're friends in the coaching circles. We're both young coaches, and it was just kind of a playful jab, quite honestly.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, and that's something that only they know. And I don't know. I hope that's the case, because if not, Dad, add this to the pile of strange press conference moments for some first-time head coaches that we've seen over the years, whether it was Adam Gase and the eyes, whether it's Nick Sirianni. Obviously, Ben Johnson knows a thing or two about head coaches who have had interesting introductory press conferences, with Dan Campbell and the kneecap biting that sort of defined that team. But either way, Dad, going in and ingratiating yourself with the locals by making fun of the team that you've always gone back and forth with in the Green Bay Packers, usually good business here. But I think for this hire, Dad, too, the most obvious one of the entire cycle, right? The Bears, even though they interviewed a billion candidates and seem to have some issues front office wise in terms of the power structure there, this is still ultimately a team that could walk to any candidate and say, hey, we've got last year's #1 overall pick. We spent a bunch on weapons. You just need to get the offensive line straight, and this seems like it can go pretty well. And, Dad, that seems like it'll be the biggest challenge for Ben Johnson, who is one of the most gifted play callers in the NFL. We saw that even in a losing effort against Washington. Some of the things they're able to pull out in specialty situations, the down in and down and out stuff, especially working in an offense in Detroit where he didn't have a mobile quarterback like so many of the teams left in the Final Four in the NFL right now. But the question's going to be, how quickly can he rebuild that line? Because you had one of the best in the NFL in Detroit and are now going to one last year that was circled over and over again as the problem in Chicago.
Well, obviously with the draft and free agency, you can turn around a team fairly quickly. They have about $54 million available in cap space. And if you're an offensive player, an offensive free agent, you know, it may be a destination place. You got Ben Johnson running the offense. He ran that offense in Detroit. You want to be part of the build in Chicago. That may be a spot where you could talk a free agent if the money's equal in places to go to Chicago because of the possibilities there. So, you know, having money, listen, at the end of the day, people always say, oh, you want to go play for a good coach, this or that. A lot of the times it still comes down to money. If you get offered a lot somewhere else, you may go somewhere else because you got a lot more money, but you like to be a place that the money's equal that a free agent is choosing. And certainly with Ben Johnson's reputation on offense, you may get offensive players to go down that road. And real quickly, I talked about Hank Fraley. Hank Fraley did not go to Chicago. Ben Johnson said he's not going to raid the coaching staff of the Detroit Lions. That doesn't mean other coaches won't, like Mike Vrabel took the D-line coach because they worked together in Tennessee. He took Detroit's D-line coach, Terrell Williams. But Hank Fraley certainly getting some looks to be coordinators in other spots.
Yeah, no, Hank Fraley, I know, is someone Seattle Seahawks fans have talked a lot about wanting to potentially come there and replace Ryan Grubb from last year after that went wrong. But precisely because, Dad, and I think this will be a fascinating trend to watch going forward, is the idea of an offensive line coach potentially having more of a pipeline to this, because generally personality type wise, O-line coaches are O-line coaches, and very few of them want to go and be more than that. It takes a very specific breed of human to want to go and spend all their time coaching up fat guys who stink and all sit in a room together. I say that lovingly as one of those former fat guys who stunk and hung out with my other fat friends. But if Hank Fraley wants to make that jump, Dad, teams around the NFL are seeing right now through the postseason, if you want a path towards getting better in a hurry, you've got to go and get your offensive line right. And that's two parts. Certainly one part is personnel, but the other part is, do you have one of the coaches that's truly able to teach and develop at that position? And Hank showed himself to be that. So he's going to be a valuable commodity, but so is Ben Johnson. He's a great run game designer. He affords you a lot in that way to help your group up front. And so to your point, Dad, I do think there is part of that says, hey, you've seen what he's been able to do for others. So now why wouldn't you want that for yourself? And for the Bears, the directive's easy. Go and get the offensive line. So again, Dad, like we said kind of about Aaron Glenn, this was the obvious choice. if you're grading on process, hey, Chicago, while it took a little while, they interviewed a ton of candidates in a way that seemed like a waste of time. But ultimately, they got the guy everyone expected to go out and check the box for the most important line item on their list is, can you help us fix Caleb Williams after last season where he looked so broken and beaten up and looked so frustrated on the sideline? The answer is yes for that. So, Dad, this is a home run hire for the Chicago Bears. And we still, like you said, don't know if it's actually going to work out. But at the very least, Dad, like I feel like when we're grading these things, and you correct me if I'm wrong, you've done this for a million years now, I feel like we're more grading the process and then what we know about the source than anything else, right? With Chicago, again, process was imperfect, but they get the result that we all look at and say, all right, known commodity, everyone else wanted this, and so you getting the thing everyone else want must mean something on the surface. Jesse, if we're going to grade process, this seems like a good time to talk about what the hell the Jacksonville Jaguars are doing.
Oh, God.
Yeah, so they announced it yesterday that they are parting ways with general manager Trent Baalke, and the curious timing of that is very confusing for everybody. So they're already deep into their search for a new head coach, obviously, following the dismissal of Doug Peterson. Now they're also in the market for a new GM. The whispers are coming out that this was basically because coaching candidates were wary of working with Trent Baalke. So what do you guys make of the situation? Seems like they should have let him go a lot earlier here.
Listen, Shad Khan, just this paragraph right here. Retained Baalke when he fired Doug Peterson on January 6th, saying that afternoon in a news conference that a complete organizational overhaul would be suicide. He also said if any coaching candidate expressed reservations about the organizational structure or working with Baalke, he would be willing to address the topic. Are you kidding me? So you say it'd be organizational suicide to restructure everything, then say, well, if a candidate doesn't like Baalke, we'll think about a change. How do you not just make the change? How do you not just wipe away everybody and start anew? This was such a mistake. And Trent Baalke, and even if they kept him, he was on the last year of his contract as well. This just rings of organizational misjudgment from the top. Organizational. This is from the owner. This is Shad Khan making this decision, and what a poor decision that it was to wait.
You have got a guy in Travon Walker who, listen, I know, and this is going to get used against Trent Baalke a ton, that you took him and not Aiden Hutchinson, but Travon Walker has turned into a very productive defensive player for you there. You've got Josh Allen, Hines Allen on the other side. You've got an offense that's got a young budding receiver and Brian Thomas Jr. who look great, and a star quarterback to sell people. And when you can't do that, you're exactly right, Dad. You have to look at how mismanaged this has been. Go all the way back to hiring Trent Baalke, who was the guy that helped push Jim Harbaugh out of San Francisco and then went one and done with Jim Tomsula and Chip Kelly on the way out of that. Doesn't seem like a guy that did a great job there, but let's give him not only the keys here in Jacksonville, but let's give him an extended run, even though we went through the Urban Meyer failure, the Frank Reich failure, and now the Doug Peterson failure. They were 25-43 in the 4 seasons that Trent Baalke was their general manager. With all of that in tow. But Dad, to your point, to show your ass that clearly, if you're Shad Khan, by saying, hey, no, on principle, we don't believe organizationally it's the right move to overhaul everyone. Unless one of you guys tells us that it's the right move. Stand for nothing. That's how you wind up in a series of bad relationships the way they have. And now going forward, Dad, suffer the embarrassment because they did, like everyone else, interview Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn to try and get them to come down there, and we're told no. But I think the last straw had to be Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive coordinator Liam Cohen. The headline comes out the other day that he rebuffed their effort, that he actually said, nah, I'm good. I'll go back and renegotiate for an even higher salary to stay the offensive coordinator in Tampa Bay, hang out with Baker Mayfield. He's certainly going to have plenty of suitors next year, provided things keep going the way they've gone around Tampa Bay on offense. Just publicly saying, no, I would rather go and be the coordinator here than come and be your head coach right now. Despite all of those things, like, Dad, we had talked about this coaching cycle. There aren't that many teams that can offer you a quarterback on their second contract that you trust in the way that people trust Trevor Lawrence still, even though he's not perfect. And all of that gave way to just the complete lack of leadership at the top of that organization. So deeply embarrassing stuff. Like, I feel for our buddy Emerson Latsier here. This is a dark turn in the offseason. Dad, I don't know where they go from here. They're going to go and get one of the tertiary candidates on this list, and they're going to have to hope that once again, Trevor Lawrence and company can overcome something that thus far they haven't been able to overcome.
It's kind of in the list of jobs remaining: Las Vegas, Jacksonville, New Orleans, Dallas. Now, New Orleans is in the worst spot cap-wise. They're like 57 million over the cap, and you have to be under the cap by the start of the NFL year, which is in March sometime. Dallas is under the 4 million over the cap. Jacksonville has 28 million to spend. Vegas has 35, I think, million to spend. But it's just kind of a mad job, right? I mean, they're kind of a mad team and a mad division. And you have your quarterback supposedly in Trevor Lawrence, but it's just tough to build around it. Baalke had 38 draft picks from 21 to 24. 9 became starters. That's not a great hit rate at all. So, and then to try and talk free agents into coming there, you basically, I talked about if the money is even, what is that player looking for? Like now in Chicago, especially an offensive free agent going to a Ben Johnson offense. What are you looking for in Jacksonville, unfortunately? It's just the way it is right now. You almost have to money whip somebody to come to Jacksonville.
Well, you do, and you think about what we've seen from them over the years in terms of allocating some of that money, though. Like, they paid Christian Kirk an inordinate amount of money that most other teams probably weren't going to pay him years ago. Gabe Davis, the same thing last offseason. Gave him a ton of money to come be wide receiver on this team down here. The way they've organized the offensive line, I think Shaq Griffin was one of their big free agent spends that didn't last all that long in the secondary there. So, and that's before you get to all the draft picks that you just mentioned. Flamed out for this organization. It's just hard to feel hope, Dad, when you look at it again. Now, if you're a GM candidate looking at the team, I'll say this. Clearly, you'll get some leeway because the guy up top is willing to basically compromise his morals to go out there and give you every opportunity to keep going at this, even well after you've demonstrated that, hey, this is probably not going to work out. So that could certainly be an option there. But from a coaching standpoint, Dad, even having Trevor Lawrence to work with does not seem to have been enough of a draw. And I thought for a guy in Liam Cohen, who most people thought was ahead of schedule in terms of his viability as an NFL head coaching candidate, just back in the NFL as a coordinator, calling the plays for the first time in his career, the fact that that guy looked at that opportunity with a quarterback that on paper in Trevor Lawrence is as appealing as he is and said, nah, is everything you need to know about that job going forward. So that grade, if you want to hand that out there right now, we know incomplete for the Jacksonville Jaguars, but Dad, it's going to feel like a failing grade because this organization has not done anything to set a foundation that would help a coach grow.
Yeah, and are they going to be last? Again, who's going to be next? Vegas, Jacksonville, New Orleans, Dallas. I think Dallas may be next. They're talking about Brian Schottenheimer, who was the old coordinator, maybe Kellen Moore coming back to the team. But then for Vegas, Jacksonville, and New Orleans, I mean, Aaron Glenn was supposed to interview with the Saints as well, but the Jets did what the Jets should have done. Don't let Aaron Glenn out of the building. You know you had it on your side that he played most of his career with you, so you know you had that working for you. So now you have 4 teams. Really, I really kind of take Dallas out of it. I think they're going to be set of Vegas, Jacksonville, and New Orleans of who they're going to get.
They seem set. Emerson Latzia seems sad. Our sweet baby boy. Go drown yourself.
Fined for some comments he made. Only it turns out he didn't actually make the comments. So fine rescinded, right? Problem solved. Actually, no. The NFL upheld the fine for some comments that he did make, only those comments didn't really seem terribly finable. I don't know. Hear it for yourself. Here's Joe Mixon after last week's tough loss to Kansas City.
Everybody know how it is playing up here. You can never leave it into the refs' hands, but I mean the whole world see, man, like what it is, bro. But it is what it is, you know. Like I said, when it come down to it, you can't never leave it into the refs' hands, man, and things like that. But it's all good though.
Now, I don't really think those comments seem finable. What about you guys?
Yeah, this is embarrassing as hell by the NFL to try and save face. After basically getting ballsack sports tier, now it was Sports Illustrated that improperly assigned a quote from former Bengals wideout TJ Houshmandzadeh, Dad, who was the one who went out and said the phrase, why play the game if every 50-50 call goes with the Chiefs? These officials are trash. he had put those words out, but for some reason it was mistakenly attributed to Joe Mixon. And so he got fined for that, which is already like deeply embarrassing that if you're the NFL, you can't get that right when you've got access to all this sound and you find the player there. At the very least, you could put a hand up and say, my bad. But they're trying all of a sudden shoehorn 25 grand out of this guy's wallet because he went out there and said the most benign thing possible about officiating you've seen after an emotional loss is laughable and a farce.
Oh, it really is. They fined him, found out he didn't have the quote, but then they said, we're going to fine you anyway for saying this, which, again, was just so mundane. I mean, it's ridiculous. I hope he appeals it. I have no idea what will happen if he does, but it's ridiculous. But it goes on to the bigger question is, do the Chiefs get the calls, right? And I'll say this, quarterbacks get calls. I will openly say that. And this isn't a former D lineman with just hate for quarterbacks and offense. Tom Brady, Pat Mahomes, Peyton Manning, the great quarterbacks, these refs are human, and these guys get calls. They get calls that younger quarterbacks probably wouldn't get. I'll say that, stop, end of sentence, new paragraph. But I won't blame Mahomes, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers. I blame the refs. And you talk about now Pat Mahomes doing the dancing, the fake running out of bounds on the sideline, right, to try and get more yards and getting hit and getting a flag, or the kind of dancing around and then going feet first and getting hit and getting a call, which was horrible, horrible calls. I'll say again, I don't blame the quarterbacks for that. I blame the officials and I blame the league for overprotection of the quarterback. And I get their overprotection because they want to see the quarterbacks out there, so they're going to protect them if they get hit, like the roughing the passer call on Will Anderson was a joke on Patrick Mahomes. But I blame the league. The league is the one doing this. The league is letting, all players are doing in the case of Patrick Mahomes is taking advantage of the protection. And I don't blame a player for doing that. If you can dance around, slide, and get a flag, if you can act like you're not going out of bounds and get hit and get a flag, I don't blame a guy for trying to take advantage of the rules. I blame the league for the overprotection of the quarterback. And I'll go back to what I said. Great quarterbacks, great players get calls. They do. It's the bottom line. They get calls.
I think the whole feeling around the Kansas City Chiefs right now, the clear hatred that they're starting to get just for being great, is just a math problem. It's an oversaturation problem. Because, Dad, there's plenty of stuff coming out now, and I'm sure more people are going to dig into the Chiefs and the calls they do or don't get in the postseason relative to other teams. And so far, the early returns are they're actually not getting all that more calls than people in similar situations, but we see them more. 4 Super Bowl appearances in the last 5 years, 3 wins in the last 5 years, a cavalcade of games in the most important part of the season where more people are tuned in and get to watch every single game. And the Chiefs are already a team that's on TV all the time, a team that gets talked about because the star tight end's dating the world's biggest pop star, on and on down the list. They are overexposed in a way that now has led them to the Golden State Warriors path where you can have a likable superstar all you want, a team that is largely full of those, and become hated just because people are sick and tired of you beating their team over and over again. But I think specifically with the Mahomes and the call stuff, Dad, quarterbacks you're right, get calls. We just watch Mahomes in more important games more often. Unfortunately, have those calls pop up in spots where other teams then internalize it, and this becomes the narrative going forward just because we see them in bigger games more often. I truly think that's a lion's share of what happens in both this situation, but also just in general with the fact that the people don't want the Chiefs to win now this year.
Oh, yeah. There's no doubt the Chiefs have gone to hated because of their winning. And this is just the next team that has reached that saturation point, right? They're a great team. They have great people on it, great personalities on it. The guys haven't changed. They still have they're still fun guys and such who have the personalities that they have. They just win too much. They've crossed over the line of winning too much, so now everybody wants to see him brought down. But I'll continue to say it's not the players. It's not the players making the calls. Kansas City isn't holding a gun to the league's head saying, let us have a three-peat. It is the league. It is the refs making the call, which is mandated from the league. But the refs, again, are human. And they're going to give calls to better players. They just are. They're just going to say, well, this player wouldn't normally do this in this situation, so if he doesn't, it was probably a penalty. Like a great, it's always funny, a great offensive lineman that gets called for holding kind of looks at the ref and says, wait a minute, do you know I'm a great offensive lineman? I don't need to hold. So you're calling me for a holding penalty? What are you doing? It's the nature of great players and great teams that get the calls.
And I also think part of it with Kansas City is this is a team who we've watched all year long win games at an insane clip, despite the fact that we look at them and we're like, well, you're nowhere near as good as you felt in the last few seasons, certainly nowhere near as good as when Patrick Mahomes first got here. So how are you pulling off all of these games? And the answer has been specific situations, medal in big moments down the stretch, not being intimidated by critical spots in a game that other teams might wilt under, especially in the postseason. But, Dad, when you're trying to explain that to a general public that doesn't have time to sit around and look at all these things, and hell, even to us, like, it's easy to see, hey, a team like the Buffalo Bills, Josh Allen going around making incredible plays, the way that the Baltimore Ravens go out on offense and have, clearly your Lamar Jackson playing the best football of his career, Derrick Henry in the backfield, an offense that does so much, the Detroit Lions, all these fun plays. You could see them point to why it's happening there. For Kansas City, it's a lot harder to find. And so the easier path forward is to just say, well, the refs are handing them everything and then call it a day when this team, especially relative to their standard, looks so different than what we're used to. So that's not going to stop because that team shows no signs of becoming less good anytime soon. Right. It's going to be the same way people revolted when they saw Steph Curry shimmy or chew his mouthpiece and all of a sudden started to revolt a little bit instead of celebrate it the way they used to. That's the fate for a team that now is ascending to that play. We did this with the Patriots for years. People get sick and tired of one team bogarting all the success because they want to see it for their team. And the rest of this is just window dressing for that problem. So that's what we've got going on there, Dad. And so all a frustrated Joe Mixon leading us to that for the Kansas City Chiefs. Dad, I want to look, we've talked a lot about the the head coaching hires for the NFL and the coaching carousel that's gone on now. Still plenty of jobs available, but I wanted to look at one situation, especially that it relates to us. Is there a coordinator hire out there in the NFL that has intrigued you more than most? Obviously, a lot of people may be tuning in here today to wonder what they can expect in Cincinnati out of former Notre Dame defensive coordinator Al Golden, who is the one at the top of my list right now just because it's the one that affects my life. Notre Dame's defense has been a monster since Al Golden's come over to South Bend. I think they were second in scoring defense this last year, first in a bunch of other categories, one of the top five statistically almost any way you sliced it. And now he heads to go with Zach Taylor, where he was a linebackers coach there in 2020 and 2021, I believe, before heading back to South Bend. So, Dad, this is another one of those things where clear need. Lou Anarumo, now the defensive coordinator for the Indianapolis Colts, as they play musical chairs there. But this fit in Cincinnati, Dad, trying to maximize their personnel here, I think something that Al Golden is very much equipped to go do.
Oh, without a doubt. And he had head coaching experience at Temple and the U. He was with Detroit as a tight end and linebacker coach from 16 to 19, then 20 and 21. He was in Cincinnati as a linebacker coach. Certainly deserved of this shot, right? With the defense that he built, even with all the injuries that the Notre Dame defense had. Again, you make up for that with scheme, and he did a great job. Listen, they lost in the title game. As we talked about, they stayed with the man coverage and ended up burning them. Will Howard for Ohio State ended up slicing up the Notre Dame defense. It's what it was. Ohio State was the better team. That happens. But what Al Golden has done with that defense in Notre Dame was fantastic, and he deserves a shot back to the NFL. He goes. Who knows? I don't know what his aspirations are. Maybe it's to be a head coach in the NFL someday. But they have cap space. They have about $44 million in cap space to go out and get some defensive help because they need defensive help.
They do, and you've got a guy in Trey Hendrickson who went out and led the NFL in sacks this year, so the cupboard's not totally bare, and Al Golden is a guy that came into South Bend, Dad, and maximized what they had in terms of, hey, the personnel's ever changing. And Dad, really, like Aaron Glenn in the NFL this year with the Detroit Lions, sort of a similar fate for Al Golden in South Bend as you lost Benjamin Morrison early on, Jordan Botelho, Boubacar Traore, a number of other guys in the defensive front, and then Riley Mills in the college football playoff stretch. And they never once compromised their standard. They never once used it as an issue. They got a ton of young guys, sophomores and freshmen, ready to play and star in their role early on, brought them along so they were big-time contributors by the end. And so the development process on that side of the ball, they were always a fast, incredibly physical, aggressive unit, played more man coverage than everyone, blitzed a ton. But, Dad, they were also incredibly well prepared for almost every scenario. And to have that many guys actually that prepared to go out there and play, to me, is one of the most impressive parts of what Al Golden was able to do.
Completely agree. So again, deserves this chance back in the NFL. So we'll see what he makes of it. I guess it's not a surprise, but it's like, here we go again. Is Josh McDaniels for the third time going to be the offensive coordinator for the New England Patriots? He was a coordinator in 06 and 08 with New England before he became the Broncos head coach, was a failure. Then he went to the St. Louis Rams as an offensive coordinator. Then he came back to New England as a coordinator, was there for a few years, then became the Raiders head coach, and now is going to be the New England Patriots offensive coordinator yet again. So he keeps showing up, and it seems, I don't think he's going to get another head coaching opportunity. He had with the Broncos and with the Raiders, it was failed. I think his lot in life is going to be a coordinator, of which he has done a hell of a job. And some are better as coordinators than as head coach. And I think Josh McDaniels is one of those as he goes for his third stint as the OC of the Patriots.
That's what I was going to say is he clearly has a knack for this particular role that he is very good at.
Right.
And so maybe this doesn't work, because my initial reaction when you said he was going back here is Josh McDaniels and the New England Patriots, are they the NFL's Ben Affleck and J-Lo?
J-Lo?
Like just constantly working around to only end up back together every time. But that's one where they get back together, and every time it doesn't seem to work here. With Josh McDaniels and the Patriots, at the very least, it does seem to work in a way that it does not for him elsewhere. And maybe there's a conversation again to, relitigate about Patriots assistants not having success outside of the bubble, but he gets back with a guy he's very familiar with in a place he's very familiar with. And Dad, with a quarterback that shows a ton of promise, like at the very least, I laud the Patriots for learning that after last time when they got Mac Jones and gave him defensive coordinators and special teams coaches to come coach him up on offense, they at the very least said, all right, we're going to give you a big boy quarterbacks coach and offensive coordinator and try and see what we can make work.
And by the way, it's his gig. He's running the offense, because the other times he was there, he was with Bill Belichick. He was running the offense. This isn't like a Sean McVay or a Ben Johnson or a Zach Taylor or other coaches situation where the head coach is also an Andy Reid is the play caller and really running the offense. He is running the offense. He does have the responsibility of with
us in the Boston studio. Plenty to get to. Jesse mentioned Shai Gilgeous-Alexander just on an unholy tear right now. Looks like the clear front runner for MVP in the NBA. In fact, let me just go ahead and pull back up those odds for a second so I can see it here. But
I bet they're really good in his favor.
Yeah, very good in his favor, as I'm doing a bad job of the internet and a bad job of hosting right now. But, Dad, the opposite side of that is what we'll get to at some point with Miami Heat star Jimmy Butler, who is working very hard to be former Miami Heat star Jimmy Butler at this point. Looks like he's going to be suspended again for missing the flight with the team. Dad, did you ever come anywhere close to that? I mean, obviously, lots in life very different. You coming out as a former 10th rounder. Did you ever have any sort of flirtation with because he missed the flight on purpose. I'm asking you if it ever happened to you or anyone you knew on accident when it came to missing the team playing.
Oh, I mean, definitely guys accidentally missed a flight, but I never did, man. Are you kidding me? I was in zero position to ever accidentally or never on purpose, obviously. Hell, I went 25 years of doing the morning show, going all the way back from Arizona, where I started morning, to all the years at ESPN of having to get up at 4:15 and only having to set one alarm. And I never overslept in all the years that I did it. So I never missed it. Always knew the itinerary, was always early. Again, I was never in position. And just the way I was raised, I was too fearful of being late or missing. So no. How about you? I don't imagine you ever were either.
No, but I do remember my rookie year where I went to training camp with the Steelers. The dress code on the plane was pretty lax there. Mike Tomlin let guys do what they want, provided you weren't a total mess. And we had one of the undrafted offensive linemen on our team show up late and almost missed the team plane and was wearing like jorts when he came onto the plane. And so the very next week, not only is that one of those moments, you kind of know as a guy trying to make a roster in that spot that there's probably moments like that you're never going to fully come back from with everything else that's working against you. But in addition to that, now all of a sudden, there was actually more of a dress code for the plane rides from then on out. And so his mistake compounded and affected everybody else in a way that made sure, hey, you're probably going to have an uphill battle making this team. So Jimmy Butler, again, doing this by choice, trying to send a message for everyone else, be on time, know where you're supposed to go here. And where we're going to go is back to the NFL here briefly, though, because tomorrow we'll have the full rundown and the preview for the conference championship weekend of the NFL. Sunday's 2 games, no doubt expected to be very good. The Eagles almost a touchdown favorite against Washington, but we know that Chiefs and Bills game expected to be another classic. And it got us wondering, Jesse, about looking ahead, what the best storyline we can find is from this group.
Yeah, so let's start with the obvious one. Are the Chiefs going to three-peat? And are we going to see a celebration with Taylor Swift on the field? I don't know. I mean, come on. We've talked a little bit about how obviously people are getting a little bit overstimulated. I don't know what the word is. Like, there's just so much Chiefs out there. Do you know what I mean? And so much Taylor content. Yeah. But we love Taylor on this show.
We do, but we have reached the saturation point with the Chiefs, right? Where Taylor Swift, for a while, was the headline around there because, you know, the misogyny of it all, where people were just mad for a little while that a woman was getting television time during a game in the NFL and she wasn't playing in the game. And, how can we ever survive this? And now she's just a part of the fabric of the experience. Dad, seeing her in the box with Caitlin Clark feels as normal as watching, you know, Travis Kelce go in the end zone and do the Archer celebration. Like, all of it feels right there. But to Jesse's point, like, Dad, this is the biggest headline of the bunch, is if the Kansas City Chiefs are able to go out and three-peat, do something no one's ever done and do it with this team this year, that would historically, I think, be the biggest headline that could come out of this postseason run. And now, based on the stuff that we talked about in the first hour, it seems like the headline that the rest of the country wants to see least. Like, when we do all these graphs of who people are rooting for in the Super Bowl, if it gets to the Chiefs being in the Super Bowl against either Washington or Philadelphia, I would have to imagine that the graph outside of the Kansas City area would be almost entirely whatever the color of the other team was.
Yeah, I would agree that's the top storyline because it's never been done, a three-peat. But I think a close second is the Bills. The Bills are 0-4, and a lot of it during my time playing with Jim Kelly as the quarterback. They've never gotten over the hump, and this team has been really talented, but they've run into the kind of the Michael Jordan effect of you can be a great NBA team, but you run into the Bulls and Michael Jordan, you know what, you're not the best team. And that's what the Bills have run into. They've run into the Chiefs in the postseason, and they realize they're not the best team. The Chiefs are. Listen, Philadelphia won a Super Bowl a couple of years ago. Certainly would be great, obviously, for that city to win it again. The Commanders, I mean, what to have a rookie quarterback start in the Super Bowl, which would be a first. They haven't been to, the NFC title game since, 91? Again, that's my era of play. It's an incredible story. But I definitely think the three-peat is the top because it's never been done. But I think a close second is the Bills finally getting off the 0-4 schneid of the Super Bowl and really beating their modern-day nemesis, the Chiefs, to get to do it.
Yeah, I do think it's probably a 1 or 2A, 2B with that. And Jaden Daniels, I think if he made in the Super Bowl and God forbid Washington won, that would be massive and an insane storyline for a franchise that – between the ownership stuff with Dan Snyder and the ineptitude on the field, the failed misses with the injuries to guys like RG3 when they thought things were getting back, all of that in year one for that player. And coming off a year last year where we had CJ Stroud, we thought revamped the way that rookie quarterbacks were able to go and accomplish in a way that wasn't going to be touched. For Jaden Daniels to supersede that in so many ways would be awesome. But I do think the most interesting one is Buffalo because, Dad, if you're Josh Allen especially, and we always, quarterback wins so much of this conversation at the generalist level, but for Josh Allen, you are in an interesting spot where in the regular season, you've been phenomenal. but you just haven't been as good as Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, these guys that have been passing the MVP back and forth for a number of years here. When it came to that, even coming off of what most people would look at and say, Josh Allen played MVP football, he's just probably not going to win the award because Lamar Jackson went out there and statistically went and usurped everything that he had done in the past. And then so you go to the postseason and say, all right, well, Josh Allen in the postseason, more accomplished in some bigger moments than Lamar Jackson. He's got that to hang over his head. But then you run into the stopper of Patrick Mahomes, where he's got a great record against him in the regular season when these two teams square off, but 0-3 in the postseason with some gut-wrenching losses that have been rule changes there. And so now having that cap there, they've been caught in a limbo, Dad, where we talk about it all the time. 90% of the NFL would kill for the problems that the Buffalo Bills have.
Yeah.
Because they are still the dominant team in the AFC East right now, post New England and their long run in that division, and a team that is going to be a perennial playoff squad and has the answer at quarterback. And they've got one of the guys. Like, other teams have to convince themselves sometimes. Yeah, you get a quarterback, he might even be a second contract guy, might be a top 10 or 12 guy on his best day. But you're trying to convince yourself that he's one of those ones. Josh Allen, you don't have to do the convincing. Josh Allen is on his best day, one of the 3 best quarterbacks in professional football. The Bills have that. Everyone else chases it. And yet, Dad, after a while, we see all the time fan bases go nose blind to that kind of success if you don't get over the hump at some point. And while I don't think this is the year, like the Bills, because of the offensive line and the way that it works and because of the coaching job there along with the quarterback, are going to be good for a number of years. But this still does feel like an incredible opportunity, given the fact that the Chiefs do look more vulnerable than they have in quite some time.
And it's amazing. We talk about Josh Allen, but when you talk about Josh Allen, you do talk about his running as well, because this may be the rushing attack of Buffalo that helps them win this game, right? I mean, Buffalo had 120 yards against Denver, which was number 3 in the league against the run. Then they had 147 yards rushing in the game I did against Baltimore. Baltimore was number 1 in the league against the run. So this may be a James Cook and Josh Allen rushing attack, and we'll break it down more tomorrow. And with that offensive line of Buffalo, which, by the way, doesn't give up a lot of sacks either, that's in part, obviously, to the line and to Josh Allen. But the rushing attack for Buffalo has really, I know it's only been a couple of games, but a couple of games against really good rush defenses that they have found success.
Yeah, I think if we're looking for, because we mentioned each of these teams has an interesting storyline to offer at this point, right? The Chiefs have the three-peat. The Bills have everything we just talked about. The rookie quarterback situation for Jaden Daniels. For the Philadelphia Eagles, God, consider this 3-year stretch a Super Bowl appearance with one of the best games we've seen by a quarterback in Jalen Hurts that nets him a contract. The following season where everything falls apart, we have questions about Nick Sirianni. And now this year where they reinvent themselves surrounding Saquon Barkley and a great offensive line that's at the core of this, a young defense that just said, we're going to draft Georgia Bulldogs until you pass out. And lo and behold, it ends up being a competent strategy for Vic Fangio and that bunch. But Dad, pointing that out with the Eagles and the Bills, it is also a postseason and a few-year stretch where we have seen might makes right when it comes to formulating your game plan around having an offensive line and a running game that's going to be the focal point of your team. We had seen years ago, and I was talking the other day, I went on the podcast last night with Jackson Bevins talking about this league-wide around the NFL and how the Kansas City Chiefs were sort of the proxy for what was going on everywhere else in the league. Hey, this is an 11 personnel spread out passing league right now. Patrick Mahomes comes into the Kansas City Chiefs and they're immediately the 07 Patriots version of the dynasty, not the early version where Tom had to win with defense. And now we're seeing everyone around the league start to figure out, hey, you can have a lot of success and make the game really easy if you can just run and stop the run. These old, tired football cliches that no one wants to hear, but that are the basis of this playoff run for these two teams in particular. And, Dad, if we get a Bills-Eagles Super Bowl, we are going to have the Spider-Man pointing meme of teams where, yes, Philadelphia, I think personnel-wise, probably has claim to the better defense at this point. But overall, they would be two teams founded on the same things that have gone out and tried to make football really simple by finding the rarest thing out there, which is big quality offensive lines that they can build their team around, great coaches that they've got there in Aaron Cromer in Buffalo and Jeff Stoutland in Philadelphia. And going forward, if you are other teams out there, the edict does seem to be, unless you've got this position group right and really that phase of football right, it's a non-starter in 2024, 2025 for teams trying to go and succeed at this level.
Yeah, but I will say toward the end of the year when Washington beat Philadelphia did rush for 211 yards. But the Washington showed that they can outscore you. They won that game 36-33. And
yes,
and Philadelphia was second only to Baltimore in rushing in the playoffs and in the regular season. But Philadelphia's averaging 227 yards rushing in their 2 playoff games. They're going to be able to run the ball on Washington, but Washington's able to score. I mean, this again could be an over game, as we talked about. We'll get into it a little more tomorrow and breaking it down. But Washington definitely gives up the run, but they can score on the other end. And in a bigger picture, we talk about what team this means the most for. I think the best feel-good story has got to be Washington, right? I mean, Dan Quinn takes over a team. They have a rookie quarterback who can make history, who's showing he's an unbelievable rookie. But just for the team itself, the dreck of Dan Snyder, the stench of Dan Snyder's ownership and that team and what that team went through and what the fans had to put up with to where the ownership, it's like you opened the window and just that fresh breeze came through and just freshened everything up. So from the biggest standpoint, Washington has to be overall the best story. They're the surprise of the playoffs, right? Being one of the 4 that is left. They're definitely the biggest surprise. But also, I think one of the best stories in how they just swept away the garbage that was the old regime at Washington, and it started new, which would have been a nice thing anyway, but they started new, and they're in the NFC Championship game to boot with a rookie quarterback.
And if you are Washington, remember you had the very public rebuffing by Ben Johnson last year that happened when he decided not to take that job and go back to Detroit. You hire Dan Quinn after that in a way that did not look great optically for Dan Quinn. And all he's done is go out here and maximize his second opportunity and actually send Ben Johnson leading that Lions offense home in the NFC's divisional round game where that team went out and lit up the scoreboard again. So he's making the most of that second chance. Cliff Kingsbury has been much better than we left him last time in terms of that. And you're right, kind of exactly like the Texans, that team that we tried to comp for Chicago so much, who exercised all those demons of Jack Easterby and what happened with Deshaun Watson at the end of his tenure there and the mismanagement of that franchise to come out on the other side after a successful rookie campaign with at least just normal football problems this year. Hey, even if Washington takes a step back next year on the field, like we saw for Houston this year, coming off an incredible rookie campaign.
Guys, in the world of the NBA, the drama is drama-ing. Okay, Jimmy Butler has been suspended again. Stop me if you heard this one before. Okay, so he just returned on Friday from a 7-game team suspension for multiple instances of conduct detrimental to the team. Then he missed a flight, and now he's suspended for 2 more games. So, I mean, he's suspended for games. He's playing games. What do you guys think? How bad is this going to get before the trade deadline in a few weeks?
I mean, I don't know if it gets much worse than this, but I'd expect this to be the trend until we get to that point. And, you know, Jimmy Butler and company have also dodged questions about, hey, what if it doesn't work out? What if, you know, the Suns mortgaging and getting all these picks to try and maybe go and add Jimmy Butler to the mix is the one spot that so far people have tried to shoehorn him in, all of a sudden doesn't pan out. But Dad, I would expect some version of this all the way in the lead up to this, right? Jimmy Butler could go and teach the master class on how to get yourself out of a team situation that you no longer want to be a part of. And this just seems to be another chapter in the book.
You also have to be a power player, right? I mean, not anybody can do this.
Oh yeah.
But if you're Jimmy Butler, obviously you can. Now, there are questions about missing the flight. They canceled a team practice. They had to leave earlier. But to think that all the players didn't know that they were leaving earlier is ridiculous. And so that's not an excuse at all. He planned on joining the team on their road trip. I think it's a 2-game road trip, but they said basically stay home, you're suspended. Listen, they're sitting in the 9th spot right now at 500, 21-21. Without Jimmy Butler, they probably won't even make the play-in, quite honestly. So it's a matter of what Miami wants to do, right? Do you trade him and be done with the headache and move on? Do you hang on to him, let him decline his $52 million player option because of the money situation? Is it better for you to hang on to him? Is it better for you to get rid of him, for headache's sake? I don't know. I'm not there. And we know Pat Riley has been at this a long, long time. And not only will Pat Riley probably want to do what's right for Miami, but you wonder what's kind of in his head too is he can be a spiteful guy as well. I mean, he's been at this a long time and is not looking for anybody to dictate to him how the Miami Heat are run. So you don't think he's taking this personally as well on how he's running the business?
It's just funny watching the guy that was the preeminent banner for Heat culture all of a sudden go and undermine it immediately. And that's been on the court too. The on the court part is interesting. I think ultimately, Dad, this benefits everyone to get him the hell out of there at this point. I think he's going to be gone by the time we get to the deadline here. But on the court, I do wonder if he stuck around, if all of a sudden he would just kind of revert back to form, especially if they wound up at or near the postseason, to try and go, and at the very least, make himself desirable for other people again after this. Because right now, Bobby Marks over at ESPN pointed this out, courtesy of ESPN Stats and Info and Second Spectrum, with Jimmy Butler. And right now, the effort on the court that you're not getting. He's attempted fewer than 10 field goals in 4 of his last 5 games. This 5-game stretch with no more than 57 points, 42 assists, or 42 field goals, and 14 free throw attempts is the lowest he's had since 2013. And versus Portland, he moved at a fast speed 5% of the time. His second lowest percentage in a game where he's played at least 20 minutes, only took a shot on 14% of his touches, third lowest in a game this season with a minimum 50 touches. Like, Dad, he has made it very clear. I don't want to be here anymore. But if somehow that didn't work out, I can't imagine that a guy that wants someone else to pay him to play basketball this offseason would maintain this same level of effort down the stretch if all of a sudden they end up locked in the room together. It would either be, hey, we're going to just like pay you to get the hell out of here and go home, or everyone involved would look and say, all right, we know exactly why he's doing this, trying to send the message that I want out no matter what. And if that doesn't work out, then we'll see if we can tap back into this one more time before we send you somewhere else this summer.
Yeah, and it looks like Phoenix is the team trying to position itself. They traded their 2031 first rounder to Utah for 3 first-round picks, but they're 3 picks that are the worst pick of 3 teams. I won't get into the machinations of it, but they're 3 first-round picks, but it just gives them more ammunition to use in a trade for Jimmy Butler. And you trade for Jimmy Butler. I mean, listen, Kevin Durant's 36 years old. You're talking about a timeline here, right? Of trying to make hay for a Suns team that is sitting we talk about Miami sitting in the 9th slot. The Suns are in the 10th slot. 1 game over 500. They're barely hanging on in the play-in for the play-in round right now. But it would be a timing thing as well, of how quickly do you get something done with the age on the roster, again, of Durant being 36, Butler's 35. So it's not like there's, oh, yeah, let's bring him in and we have years to build a championship. It's like going to be now or never.
Yeah, the Suns situation, man, just seems like a mess. Like, you've gone all in. You're paying a ton of money right now. I think, what is it here? The Suns are going to pay a league high $168 million in luxury tax on top of the $216 million in salary cap that they're already paying this season. So it's a mess there, and continuing to try and build the plane dead basically by doing an older version and less accomplished version of what they did with Kevin Durant and the Brooklyn Nets years ago. Where, like, look, and Bradley Beal and Devin Booker and Kevin Durant are all leading the team in scoring and doing all those things there. But we've talked about the lack of any sort of post defense for this team that's made them completely untenable. The point guard conversation that we had coming off last year. This doesn't seem like a group that has stuff together, and adding late stage Jimmy Butler, even though, like, hey, we're going to do the playoff Jimmy thing where he can turn it on there, does not seem like it's a realistic option. It might be the only option on the table for a Suns team that's got no other choice right now, but this experiment seems to be a massive failure overall for them. And so going now kiss with these two sides feels appropriate, given that everyone involved seems like they are past their best days of being able to go and win at a high level, especially in the postseason.
Yeah, it's a mess. I don't know what the Suns are doing, quite honestly. I really don't. To trade for Jimmy Butler and to try to put everything into the next year or two, I think is crazy. I do. I agree. I think it's like the building of the Brooklyn Nets, which was one of the worst put together three superstars that there was. So yeah, I don't understand what the Suns are doing here. It's a mess. But this is. We talk about athletes, and we think in the NBA that the NBA players probably have the most power, the better player you are, and Jimmy Butler is certainly wielding that power. Listen, he's not missing the money he's being fined by any stretch of the imagination. He is trying to do what's best for him, basically saying, hey, if I have to play, I'll play to the best of my abilities. That's what I'm going to do. But, when your heart's not really in it, you don't want to be there. You wonder what kind of effort you're going to get, what kind of team play you're going to get. It's just an absolute, just unmitigated mess in Miami right now.
It is interesting, too, to think about these older stars, because you mentioned the stars forcing their way out. Kind of feels like a remnant of a bygone time, at least right now, when you look up at the current NBA and the teams that are in power. It's been teams that are built on continuity. For a while, we did hey, we're going to chase these super teams, try and put them together, get guys to go. And then now you sit up and look at a Cleveland Cavaliers team that improved tremendously last year and is far ahead of the Eastern Conference against a Boston Celtics team that's opted to keep their core together at every turn. A New York Knicks team that no doubt adding Karl Anthony Towns was great, but the foundation set there of the Villanova Knicks under Tibbs has given them the bedrock in the West. Oklahoma City in the young core that they've rebuilt. The Houston Rockets doing that right now with great defense and the young players there. On and on down the list. It's just funny, Dad, coming off a year where last season we had, I think the first time we had the second round of the playoffs without LeBron, Kevin Durant, and at least one of the and Steph Curry that we had in like a decade or some insane stat like that. And we thought that was the end. And then we got a hit of the good stuff with the Olympic team, right? Those guys all go out and are the reason why the U.S. goes and wins gold in Paris on the men's side for basketball. But then we come back to the NBA season and we're reminded that it feels like a new reality around the association right now with roster construction and the way the best teams are going and giving themselves a chance to not just one and done be competitive in the NBA, but giving themselves the kind of foundation and the organizational structure to go and do that. And that's just not led by the same guys that we're used to it being led by or the same manner of team building we're used to it getting it done by.
Well, right. I mean, we're used to the Steph Currys and the LeBron James of coming to the end of their careers and building around them to try and win. Now, obviously, Golden State had unbelievable amount of success, and the Lakers did in the bubble year. But for the Lakers, you're trying to build year to year before LeBron is done. God knows when that's going to be. But you're right. The Cavaliers, Oklahoma City are building for now and the future. And the Celtics have been the Celtics for a while now, and they'll be right there looking to repeat. The Rockets have built, well, Memphis, it's amazing with Ja Morant out in the court, how good the team is when he isn't busy getting suspended. So, yeah, the teams that are leading the conferences are built for now and the future, while we talk about the great older players, and you're just kind of building year to year. Again, I don't know what the Suns with Durant and the possibility of Jimmy Butler are really doing. I mean, that's just looking like more money spent and more failure.
Yeah, but I guess if you're that franchise, it's sort of, Dad, feels a little bit like the New York Jets and the team building in the NFL where, hey, once you decide the foundation of your team is going to be Kevin Durant, who came out and said, I'm not like other 36-year-old players at my age, and I'm certain is going to play good basketball closer to 40, similar to his counterpart in LeBron James, but there's still this feeling that team building in that way feels a little bit more fleeting and was always difficult. We saw that for years, even with a Milwaukee Bucks team that has rebounded nicely this year and has been one of the top 4 teams in the Eastern Conference for most of the season. Bringing Dame Lillard over last year was another reminder of how difficult that can be for the 76ers, trying to integrate Paul George into a lineup where the team's been marred by injury so much. All of this is more difficult than we give it credit for, and the Suns have made that their whole identity, especially once they added Bradley Beal to the mix. And so again, we're going to spin the tires on this with Jimmy Butler, but it just sort of underscores that this is a trade deadline, Dad, that does not feel like it's going to have the sort of marquee movement that we got used to, or at least with the names that we were used to. We were used to the trade deadline being, what is ex-LeBron James-led team going to add in order to give them a chance to win again here? But now you've got them making some moves around the periphery. Steph Curry openly saying, hey, we shouldn't swing big for something right now because we're just not good enough to go and get it done. Even if you bring us something in from the trade deadline here, it just feels very different because this is a transition period for the NFL away from its old superstars and into the new ones.
But do you swing if you're the Lakers? They have 2 tradable first-round picks. You know, do you use them to try? They're sitting in the 5 slot right now at 23 and 18. LeBron and AD think, you know, hey, let's make a move. LeBron's quote, though, is that's how our team is constructed. We don't have room for error. We don't have a choice. That's the way our team is constructed. We have to play close to perfect basketball. So do they make a move with a couple of tradable, as I said, first rounders and give up some of the future first round picks for the now? And you've kind of put yourself in that position, haven't you, to try and win a championship with LeBron and AD before that pairing ends?
Oh, yeah. Listen, the clock is ticking on those teams in the way they built themselves, but also you're right, the age of their star players. So, yeah, I won't be stunned at all when the Lakers go and make some sort of move because, right now they are in range, but also year in and year out, you're going to be wondering now more than ever as we went through that in the fall where LeBron James had some valleys that were lower than we had seen in a while for him, had to spend time away from the team dealing with the foot injury. All these things, and we continue to hear it from himself. I'm not going to keep doing this forever. I could play for 5 to 7 more years, but I'm not going to. Just continues to send the message to everyone else like, hey, we need to make moves while there are moves to be made left out here. So they're going to be players in all of this, but it just does, I think, for so often, and now maybe the NFL more so than the NBA has become a place where the trade deadline is netting more contenders immediate results than anybody else because of the way that league is structured. I just don't know if the NBA trade deadline is going to have a move of substance that moves the needle. Jimmy Butler, I truly believe, will not be a member of the Miami Heat after February 6th.
No.
But at the same time, if he goes to the Phoenix Suns, I just don't know how much that buys you in the year of our Lord 2025. So that's going to be the big question that we continue to spin around and ask here for the next couple of weeks in the NBA. While to Jesse's point in the last block of the first hour, we're probably just going to sit around here and also have to invent a bunch of reasons to act like someone other than Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is going to win MVP over the course of this NBA season. We know who the truly great teams are right now.
College basketball coaches acting naughty. All right, we recently talked about Mick Cronin calling out his players after a dismal performance. Now we have 2-time reigning national champion Dan Hurley taking issue with cameramen, ? I don't know. He was seen on camera yelling at an official, telling him not to turn his back on him. He's the best coach in the sport. And then he went to explain in the post-game presser about his outburst. Take a listen.
The TV likes me, camera. I bet you I'm going to have the GAs. I'll release it to the media too. What was the game on today? It was on FS1. I just wish they'd put the camera on the other coach more. You know, obviously I had a moment with Coach Dad Mata today because he was so far out of the box that I figure I would just go over and have a powwow with him and Pat. You know, but like I just wish they would show these other coaches losing their minds at the officials in other Big East games that I'm coaching, where I look going into a timeout when I'm not talking to officials. I see the other coaches as demonstrative as I am. But, you know, the camera, obviously, I've created this for myself. I'm not no victim. But I just wish that they would not have the camera on me 90% of the time.
I mean, he answered his own question. He was like, I've created this situation for myself, so I can't complain, proceeds to complain.
I was going to say, that was a real, I never grinded my feet on Eddie Murphy's couch. I got a little more sense than that. Yeah, I remember grinding my feet on Eddie Murphy's couch. Like, Danny Hurley, Dad, just a wild personality and a head coach, and a guy who's had a ton of success, and so success is going to breed all of the attention as he outlined there. But he's just a different personality. Like, I have never been in a position in my life where I've never been, the best at anything I was doing, so I guess I can't there. But the thought of actually yelling that at an official in the middle of a game, I think is something Danny Hurley probably would have done anyway, let alone a year where, UConn's lost a few more games than they're used to. They've had a couple of these upsets during the season, but this is just who he is personality-wise, and he's had the wins to overcome it, but doesn't make it any easier to deal with if you're the guy and the official there.
No, and listen, he knows, and he obviously, took the rap, said he's not the victim, and I'm glad he said that because he's not. And he can wish all he wants that the camera will be on the other coaches, but it's not going to happen. He is the demonstrative coach out there of a two-time national championship team, so you're going to get the lion's share of pub. That's just the way it works. Deep down, he knows that, so he can wish whatever he wants, but he knows he's going to get the pub because he is going to act out. That's kind of his style. That's his coaching style. So the camera will remain on him, and maybe we'll get great sound bites. And by the way, TV loves it because they get these actions from him, demonstrative actions from him. So they absolutely love it.
It's weird because Danny Hurley looks nerdy. Like, he looks like a guy that should be talking about, like, analytics and the volume of three-pointers that we're taking, but conducts himself a lot more like a meathead. Like, he has got that, like, Kobe Bryant Mamba mentality and clearly lacks no confidence in himself. So I think it's just that. It's the jarring nature of his level of confidence in the visual package that it comes in being something that every time I see and hear it is always going to be a little bit jarring. But either way, like, as long as they're winning games, no one around Stores is certainly going to care. I don't know how his peers probably feel about him constantly reminding everyone that he believes he's the best coach in the sport, no matter what, in a sport that, especially in college basketball, and especially on the men's side, where for years pre-NIL and with one and done, like, the coaches have been the stars here, and these guys all, I think, to some extent have understood that. Danny Hurley seems to have stepped up into that role as well or better than anyone. So fun in college basketball there. Dad, some news and announcements in the NFL as we get to the home stretch of the season. And we know the Super Bowl, the NFL Honors Award Show, has become a big culmination of their season every year where they hand out all the hardware around the league. We've now got the finalists announced for the NFL's awards here, including MVP, where the 4 finalists were announced here. And this one was interesting. The 5 finalists for the MVP. And Dad, 4 of them, not surprising here, Josh Allen, Saquon Barkley, Lamar Jackson, and Joe Burrow in the mix, along with Lions quarterback Jared Goff. Dad, this is, for me, Jared Goff was great this season, but this is still very much one of these things was not like the other in terms of the MVP candidates in the final 5.
Yeah, and I still believe if Saquon Barkley would have broken Eric Dickerson's record, he would be the MVP. I think he would have gotten the MVP, but they sat him for Week 18, so he did not because they're obviously – and it doesn't matter the run they made in the playoffs because, remember, these are all regular season awards. The voting is done on it. But I truly believe if he'd have broke ED's record, he would have got the MVP. But I do think – so it's Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Saquon Barkley, Jared Goff, and Lamar Jackson are the 5 finalists there. And it's a 2-person race. And I actually think Lamar is going to win his 3rd award. Offensive Player of the Year is Barkley, Burrow, Jamar Chase, and Derrick Henry, and Lamar Jackson. So you have a few holdovers from the MVP. So you wonder, and what's interesting is Josh Allen isn't up for this award.
Well, I just feel like Offensive Player of the Year has always turned into how do we celebrate either the best running back left or somebody else. That to me is the interesting one. Is this would seem tailor-made for where Saquon Barkley gets his flowers for being just the 9th 2,000-yard rusher in NFL history. But, man, Joe Burrow is all we could talk about, and understandably so at the end of the season, what him and Jamar Chase did. Maybe it's inextricable and they can't pull it apart, and all of a sudden Saquon wins there. I would have no beef with that. But, Dad, that does seem to be a 2-man race in my mind between Saquon Barkley and Joe Burrow, who, if the team and the defense really had been any better at any point of the season, could be pushing Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen for the MVP.
Completely agree. He'd have pushed if the team was better, but it's not. And one of the reasons it was at least where it was and made a little bit of a run was because of their defensive player, Trey Hendrickson. The defensive player of the year, the finalists, the not surprising Myles Garrett and TJ Watt are up for it. But Patrick Surtain, the Broncos all-pro cornerback, is up for it, as is Trey Hendrickson, who led the league in sacks, and Zach Baun, the linebacker for the Philadelphia Eagles, who had just an incredible year earning all-pro honors. he is in the mix. So that's impressive for Vaughn. I think Trey Hendrickson is probably, if from a stat standpoint, the leader in sacks. You wonder if he's going to get it because of that.
Yeah, man. This one seems as wide open. Like, I saw plenty of people making an argument for Pat Surtain just because the Broncos' resurgent defense was such a big story for that team that overachieved relative to some people's expectation. But this one, Dad, I'd struggle to pick who I thought was going to win this one. I would say two of the names like TJ Watt or Myles Garrett might be in there, but Zach Bond in the season he's had in Philadelphia for a defense that's now one of the best left in the dance. I don't think he's going to win it, but man, the fact that he's even up for it at off-ball linebacker right now, because this tends to skew, outside of the Ray Lewises of the world, so much to the guys that can get up front and harass the quarterback. Offensive Rookie of the Year, Dad, Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, and Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers, who probably should win this award, but Jaden Daniels in the season that he's had, now culminating in appearance in Conference Championship weekend, feels like that's going to be hard to overcome.
Yeah, I think Jaden Daniels is going to win that one pretty easily, even though Brock Bowers had a monster year. How about Defensive Rookie of the Year? Cooper DeJean and Quinion Mitchell from the Eagles, both in it. Braden Fisk from the Rams, Chop Robinson, the Dolphins edge rusher, who had 6 sacks, and Jared Verse. So you have a couple of pair of teammates in this one. I'm not sure where this one's going to go, Mike.
I think Jared Verse is probably going to win this one, although you could make an argument for either of the Eagles rookies in the mix as well here. But I think Jared Verse, while the leader in sacks, Chop Robinson, Braden Fisk actually leading all rookies with 8.5 sacks. Chop Robinson had an incredible season for the Dolphins. So that one could be a battle of teammates there. And then Coach of the Year, Dad, Dan Campbell, Kevin O'Connell, Sean Payton, Dan Quinn, and Andy Reid, the finalists here. Do you think Dan Campbell pried it out of Kevin O'Connell's hands with that win late in the season?
Boy, again, remember, this is a regular season award, and he may have done it, getting Detroit their first ever #1 seed. He may have gotten it, though. Dan Quinn in Washington making the playoffs.
You off merrily into the rest of your day, where hopefully none of you are sleeping in an airport at this point. I just saw a headline that gave me so much PTSD that apparently because of the ice storms and school closures, half of TSA employees at Hartsfield Jackson had called out, I believe, going into yesterday, that made that day even more of a nightmare. So thoughts and prayers to anyone that was stuck around there. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review our show. Leave it a 5-star rating. Watch us live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. We've only got a week and a half until the Super Bowl, which is insane. We'll be down in New Orleans all week long, having a great time there. I went down to do some stuff you'll get to see during the next week. And all I can say is, Dad, getting to go and do like a sightseeing visit to New Orleans reminded me of just what a physical test for us that Super Bowl week is going to be. Sunday to the following Monday after the game, trying to not gain an insane amount of weight in that time period, trying to survive all the runs through Bourbon Street that people I'm sure are going to make during Super Bowl week. This is going to be one where you're just, if you're a media member out there, you don't want to be the headline for your company by the end of the week. Stay safe, keep your head down, and don't give way to all the hand grenades down there on Bourbon Street.
This is going to be like going on a cruise, where you diet before you go on a cruise because you know you're going to gain 5 or 10 pounds on a cruise, because all you do is eat. So that's all we're going to do down there is eat, because it's great food, and by God, we know it's rich and fattening food, and by God, we know we're going to have our share of it.
I mean, I just don't know when it ends for me. Like, coming off Christmas, I wanted that run there. I was like, oh, I'm going to have a little treat because it's the holidays. And then I come back here and we got this national championship run for Notre Dame where, I'm going to eat because we're at the championship game. And now a week and a half later, I'm going to have water and do some hot girl walks between now and then. But God, I mean, we're peeing into the ocean at this point in terms of my body and its ability to survive the gauntlet that I've put it through here. The new year, new me really gets pushed to the end of football season. And right now we are not doing great in that regard. That being said, shows will be fun. Guests will be fun. There'll probably be a king cake on set because we can't help ourselves, and all of it is going to be right here from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern, still on Monday through Friday. Guys, let's start off with this, that, and the third. We've talked about a lot of NFL coaching news today, but one, most notably, after we went through that weird stretch where people talked about maybe the Vikings would trade Kevin O'Connell because his contract had not yet been worked out. Well, that all changed now here as Kevin O'Connell and the Minnesota Vikings do reach a lucrative multi-year agreement that keeps him as the Minnesota Vikings head coach for a number of years to come here now. It's unclear what the nature of the deal is now. But Dad, sounds like he is going to be around there for a good long time.
Hearing a couple of Kevin O'Connell possibly being traded, Mike Tomlin possibly being traded, was just laughable and a head scratcher to me in both instances. Minnesota had an unbelievable year. Like, they weren't going to extend Kevin O'Connell. I mean, who in their right mind would think that they would trade away Kevin O'Connell and not keep him for the year that he had? This was about as big a no-brainer as can be in the league.
100%. And a guy who all of the human stuff, all the emotional intelligence stuff coming out about how he deals with his quarterbacks. He is one of the guys that the NFL mic'd up has been better to than almost anybody, because we get all these instances of him loving up players, saying nice stuff to opposing players. He had that moment with Anthony Richardson early in the season. So he's just a guy that has acquitted himself very well as a human being, as a leader, and gotten the most out of this football team at a time where others would have maybe spit the bit. So congratulations, incredibly well-deserved for Kevin O'Connell, and a great get for the Minnesota Vikings to keep him around there for the immediate future. Jesse, let's get to that. Major League Baseball's Hall of Fame class getting announced with a very big-time headliner.
Yeah, Ichiro Suzuki became the first Japanese-born player elected to the Hall of Fame. He fell one vote shy of a unanimous selection. Are we surprised at this? Who was the dissenter? Name yourself.
It's idiotic. This is one of the most idiotic voting groups there is in the Hall of Fame. And they do this purposely to not have a there's only been one unanimous vote getter, and that's Mariano Rivera in 2019, got all the votes. Ichiro wasn't going to get all the votes. As you mentioned, first Japanese-born player in the Hall of Fame. This is on purpose, so he wasn't a unanimous Hall of Famer. It's a friggin' joke. This guy deserved to be, and there's others that deserve to be as well. But you look at the top 10 vote getters: Mariano Rivera, 100%. Ichiro, 99.7%. Joke. Derek Jeter, 99.7%. Ken Griffey Jr., 99.3% of the vote. Tom Seaver, back in 92, 98.8% of the vote. Nolan Ryan, 98.8%. Cal Ripken Jr., 98.5%. How these guys weren't unanimous selections? Ty Cobb, back in 1936, 98% of the vote. George Brett, 98% of the vote. It's a joke that these voters feel like they can't unanimously vote somebody in the Hall of Fame. It's one of the biggest jokes in voting in Hall of Fame there is.
We did get cool stories out of this one, though, with Ichiro. While he doesn't get to be a unanimous Hall of Famer, there was a cavalcade of great stories about him and his playing career on the timeline. And one of this, courtesy of Peter Gammons, actually got corroborated by Alex Rodriguez. So we know it to be true. It talked about in the morning in spring training in 2017, Ichiro was in the coach's room looking at his cell phone text message. Ichiro told the coaches about one message that he had received from a number he didn't recognize. The guy the guy said he'd gotten Ichiro's number from A-Rod, and that he wanted to come meet him and study his stretching system. What's the guy's name? Asked one of the coaches. And Ichiro strolled to the end of the text and said, some guy named Tom Brady. Who the F is Tom Brady? So that's how you know your true GOAT status, where you could come out here and just completely brush aside a guy who ends up being one of the GOATs in the other sports that you cover.
Holy smokes. That's amazing. I also saw a stat that Ichiro threw out the fastest ceremonial first pitch ever. That he threw out a first pitch that was 94 miles an hour.
Oh, my God.
God, chill out,
Hopefully
man.
it was one of the players actually catching that, and not another celebrity going out and catching the pitch either.
Yeah, it was. I think they were absolutely – I think they knew he was going to throw hard, and they put an actual catcher out there.
Imagine being like if they put like a mascot back there, and all of a sudden you got Ichiro throwing hot cheese directly at your grill behind home plate while you're just trying to have a good time. So congratulations to Ichiro and the rest of the Hall of Fame class here for Major League Baseball. Cool moment there, even if the baseball writers are kind of some weirdos. Jesse, let's finish off with the third and some pony talk.
Yeah, Pink Pony Club. Just kidding. This couple was camping, and they were awoken by a surprise. Okay, it was ponies. A herd of ponies. Check it out.
This is either a horse or a sheep trying to eat our tent. Holy please don't bite a hole in it. Ah! No, it doesn't give a I'm going to have to step out the tent because if he bites a hole in it... Oh my God! Look at all that! Hello. I think they're pretty chill. They're pretty chill.
Okay, couple things here. First of all, if that was him trying to scare them away with the mild-mannered, yeah, that's not going to work. Second of all, I don't know if I would categorize that as a herd. It was 4 ponies.
Yeah.
Come on.
I mean, on the post on X, it's like couple wakes up to a vicious pack. There's nothing vicious about them. No. I mean, they walked out of the tent and the ponies are just standing there. I mean, I would rather have when the tent is getting nibbled on, you're like, what the hell is that? You're thinking of maybe a bear? That would be a lot worse. A friggin' bear. But ponies, they actually stepped out of the tent and were kind of talking to the ponies, and the ponies are just looking at them. It's not like they were in any fear of being eaten by a wild pack of ponies.
Yeah, zero danger.
I mean, they were technically within reach of being eaten by a pack of wild ponies, because if all of a sudden you get a finger in there, you've seen horse teeth up close. Those aren't anything to be trifled with. That being said, you guys are absolutely right. Of the woodland creatures, or in this case, like middle of an open field looking ass creatures that you could run into, pack of ponies, pretty damn cute. Get a great video off out of it here. I'd just be terrified about getting kicked by a wild horse. There's a lot of things that are scary about being out in nature, but man, the idea of taking a hoof directly to the chest does not seem like my idea of a good time. So you just got to stay in front of them. Got to stay in front of the ponies.
Yeah. But
forget
also,
the chest.
Not a wild horse, a wild pony. So I think they're smaller than the horses. So, I mean,
I'd say take a hoof to the couillons would be a lot worse.